And a TGIF, everybody. Welcome into the First Call podcast, representing First Bet and Express Bet. Jeremy Plonk, alongside our guest handicapper this week, Scott Shapiro. We hope to have Jeff Siegel back in the saddle with this soon. Want to mention a shout out, Trevor Denman, the longtime voice, 40 years of Southern California racing, announced his retirement from Del Mar. Still doing the Del Mar meet up until last summer. Trevor has called it a career, and if there is a voice in racing, maybe if you go back, decades and decades and decades, there's somebody else other than Trevor Denman that comes first to mind. But anybody 50 years or younger, people kind of in our age bracket and younger, Scott, Trevor Denman was Southern California racing in terms of the voice of it. And it's going to be different without him for sure at Del Mar. But what a great career.
Absolutely. I mean, this was one of the first JP to kind of like call a race, kind of see a race and call it out in a little bit of a different way, not so robotical, calling out horses as they start to make their move and such, and really, mastered that art. And, a lot of other guys and gals have maybe tried to do it, but nobody was quite like Trevor, and one, you always hoped you'd get those when you singled a horse, they're going to need to sprout wings was always the one that I would, pretend I was going to get live to single like a horse and, closing out a sequence. Man, I hope Trevor gives me that call to close it out. So, what a great career. And, there hasn't been many in racing like Trevor, that's for sure.
Yeah, when I was a senior in high school, he actually came to Maryland to call a season at Pimlico, and he called the 1989 legendary Preakness for the on-track crowd of Easy Goer and Sunday Silence. That the one year he was in Maryland was actually the greatest Preakness probably of our lifetime. So, he is Southern California, no question about it. But that one moment might have been the greatest race he ever called. It happened to be one that was outside of California. Of course, a lot of people will think about his great calls and think of Zenyatta winning the Breeders' Cup Classic and out at Santa Anita, the this is unbelievable call, and he was there railside or up in the perch, I should say, for all of the great races in Southern California for the last 40 years. So salute to Trevor Denman. May he enjoy farming in Minnesota in his retirement. I remember calling to interview him for a story many, many moons ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, and he answered his phone and he said, "Hang on a second, it's a little noisy. I got to shut the tractor down." He was out mowing the field. I mean, this is Trevor Denman. You don't think of him as a farmhand, but he still is a man of the earth, and he's going to enjoy his retirement in Minnesota. So good for him, and congrats on a wonderful career. And Trevor Denman, one of the absolute Mount Rushmore announcers, I think, in the history of thoroughbred racing. Let's talk about our stakes that we will handicap this week on the First Call podcast. Of course, it's Tampa Bay Derby weekend at Tampa Bay Downs. So we will be on the Derby trail with 50 Derby qualifying points to the winner. For those of you watching on X and on YouTube, be sure to comment in the comment section. Help us grow the audience here for the podcast. For those of you listening on our longtime traditional audio channels, I'll run down the list of 8 races Scott and I will handicap over the next 30 minutes or so. On Saturday, March 8th, our handicapping schedule goes to Gulfstream Park first for the Hurricane Birdie Stakes. We'll have sprint fillies in that one and mares, and we'll go to Santa Anita for the Beholder Mile 2-turn race in the Distaff division, then the San Simeon for the Turf Sprinters. To Oaklawn Park we go, where the horse of the year, she's back. Torpedo Anna makes her 2025 debut in the Azeri Stakes, the Distaff division there, prep towards the Apple Blossom. And then to Tampa Bay Downs, they've got a big stakes card. We're going to look at 4 of the races here on the podcast on Tampa Bay Derby Day, starting with the Challenger Stakes and a horse going for a 3-peat in there. The Hillsborough on turf, the Florida Oaks, also a grass race in the 3-year-old filly ranks, and then the Tampa Bay Derby with points on the line for the Kentucky Derby. They'll have a full boat of 50 going to the winner, and that will get you in to the Kentucky Derby field in any given year. 50 points is more than enough to get in. So there is a win and you're in provision almost to this week's Tampa Bay Derby. Looking forward to that. We'll get to it at the end of the show. Want to remind you, if you're in the Beat the Host competition, be sure to play this weekend. 496 players, 496 beat the host during the 8-week regular season at Express Bet in our handicapping contest. They took on the different hosts each week. If you beat a host just once during the season, you qualified for the final. About 70 70% of players did beat a host at least once in the 8 weeks. So that means 496 players are playing this weekend in the $15,000 championship round. Congrats to everybody who qualified. Good luck to those of you playing and beat the host this weekend. Now, there was a sweep the host bonus if you were able to sweep the host in all 8 weeks. I will tell you, I was one of the worst hosts this year. I picked one winner in my 10 races. So a lot of people beat me, but could you beat the other 7 hosts? 3 players were able to pull it off, and that's a rarity to have 3 do it in a season. Congrats. They split the $6,500 prize, so about $2,166 each to Rick Quayle, John Souza, and Michael Arena. Good job, guys, sweeping the host all 8 weeks. So they split that prize. They've already got money in tow going into the championship round and beat the host. Good luck to all the players in that one. All right, Scott, you ready to get handicapping?
I am, and I'm in honor of being in all sunny locales. We tried to get the glare out. The sun is so powerful here in New Jersey that it's followed me, and it's right center on me right now. So hopefully a lot of sunshine where they're racing on Saturday, and there's a lot of sunshine here in New Jersey.
Hey, never complain about the sunshine, right? After the winter we had, as gloomy and dark and cold as it has been, we will smile at the sun. Let's go to where the sun shines all the time, Gulfstream Park. It's the Hurricane Birdie Stakes coming up on Saturday, 6.5 furlong sprint here in the Distaff division. Named for 2000's top sprinter in South Florida, Hurricane Birdie. She was pretty good when won the First Lady and the Princess Rooney that year for trainer Bernie Flint, one of my all-time favorite people on the backstretch. Bernie Flint trainee. Hurricane Birdie, the namesake of the feature race this weekend at Gulfstream Park, and that's the 10th on the card. And there are some fillies in here who put up resumes already that would make Hurricane Birdie envious. We have here, Scott. When you look at Nick Style winning 6 of 7 lifetime races, Our Disasters won 4 of 6 with 2 second-place finishes. These are fillies that don't run bad ever, much less often, and they're matched up. Nick Style, Our Disaster should be a good showdown in the Hurricane Birdie.
Without question, I think the biggest question in the race is how fast will they go early? We know that speed can be dangerous at anywhere in sprints for high quality animals, but particularly over the Gulfstream Park main track. I'm going to hope that Our Disaster does not take a ton of contention early. She comes in fresh for trainer Safi Joseph Jr. over a racetrack she's won 3 of 4 over, and she beat a rival Done Enough, who came back to win at a big price last time out. You know, Nick Style is obviously a mare that has a nose for the wire. Just 7 starts as a early 5-year-old, 6 wins, but she draws down on the inside. JP, she's probably going to go off as the favorite in here, and she could have it a little bit tougher than she has in her other races, but she's really tough to get by. But I'm going to hope that Our Disaster can get the jump and avoid getting caught up in an early battle.
Nick Style trying to keep the roll going for Bill Mott and Junior Alvarado, coming off the Fountain of Youth win last week. So we'll see if they can win in back-to-back weeks. But Our Disaster is going to try to win in back-to-back starts. She was really good last time, as you mentioned.
Confident Gaffleon on Our Disaster, who leads by a length and a half. Adios Babe flat to the boards to try to stay with her. Down at the inside, Done Enough is now third, 5 ahead of Broderie, then Walua. Off the turn and the stretch drive, Our Disaster. Time to go to work. For her, she's 1/8 of a mile out and 2 on top. Adios Babe fights the good fight and tries to gain late ground. They come past the 16th pole with Our Disaster in a winning lead. Our Disaster and jockey Tyler Gaffleon to win gate to wire by 2.5. Adios Babe second, Done Enough clung to.
And we mentioned the Fountain of Youth last week, the Mont Alvarado win with Sovereignty. Scott, I haven't had a chance to talk to you on a podcast since. What'd you make of last week's Fountain of Youth before we turn the page away from Gulfstream for this weekend?
I think there's only one horse out of there that I won. I was hoping coming out of there it was going to be River Thames because that's who I landed on. That's who I singled. But it wasn't. It was Sovereignty, who I had a lot of questions about going into the race, not only because of his running style, but and he hadn't raced since late November, but he just hadn't been training regularly like you would expect. Even the barn seemed to think he, might need the race, and they love the horse. Well, he came from well out of it to get the job done in the short stretch at Gulfstream at the mile and a 16th. I don't have him at the top of the class right now, but he certainly kind of enters in that top tier for me.
Yeah, we'll see who shows back up for the Florida Derby in a couple weeks' time. Some horses are kind of spreading their wings and trying to find that last prep to get into the Kentucky Derby. Sovereignty got plenty of qualifying points now after the win in the Fountain of Youth, so it's just a matter of where they think the best path forward for him would be to get to Louisville with the best chance. All right, let's go from Gulfstream Park to Santa Anita. When you talk Gulfstream and Santa Anita on a Saturday, I want to remind you about the Coast to Coast Pick 5. It's offered Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, matching 5 races from Gulfstream and Santa Anita. Low takeout, $1 minimum, causes some great payouts, much above what we expect to see on a parlay. So a good value play, the Coast to Coast Pick 5. Be sure to check that out Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. As for Santa Anita on Saturday, a couple co-features. The Beholder Mile goes as race number 8. And the San Simeon will be race number 9. So they're back to back. Maybe we can latch on to a daily double play here, or, a little parlay action of your own between the race of the week, the Beholder, my express bet race of the week choice here. This is a field of 6, but I don't think there's a dominant standout in here, Scott. Cavalieri's unbeaten in 3 career starts, but I don't think she lays over the field. I'm not a big speed figure advocate in terms of the buyers, but, she's got a top of a 91, and that kind of plays rather competitive with many of the others in here. So I think this is a deep race. I think there's a couple different options in this spot. I ended up landing on Ricci in here, the sprinter stretching out, because I think we're just eliminating some factors. You know how I like to do that. In tough races where it's contentious, let's get rid of what can go wrong. Speed from the rail, stretching out, sprint the route. That's why I'm on Ricci in here, and I'm going to take my shot with her. She's certainly bred. I know the practical jokes typically do better around 1 turn. She's bred to be better around 1 turn, but she's already won in a mile and a quarter in Chile. I don't know how that plays out here in the U.S. over the course of a mile, but I know she can get a little bit of distance. I ended up with Ricci in my express bet race of the week. Who did you get here in the Beholder Mile?
I like it. 2 sprints to a route. The other Baffert, kind of a more proven one, even though Cavalieri will be a bigger or a shorter pricing here, you would suspect. I went with Tarifa, and it's kind of for, not necessarily because I love this horse as a 3-year-old, but I saw this race, JP, kind of similar to you. No standout in here.
Right.
And I'm kind of reading the barn here. I think this is a little bit of an aggressive move. Brad Cox, Godolphin, they've got tons of horses, so they've got to take chances, because when a horse has 5 wins as a 4-year-old filly, they have to run in a stake. There's not a ton of options, but I think they had other options than shipping out Rest and running in a grade 1 against a couple of Bob Bafferts off the layoff. I have a feeling that Tarifa has really improved as a 4-year-old after a good but not great 3-year-old campaign. I mean, she won the Fairgrounds series down there, but it was a down year for that series that usually produces some of the top fillies. Wasn't the case. I think she's got talent. I think she's going to get the right trip in here. Hopefully Tarifa takes a big step forward as a 4-year-old, because I think she'll need to win out west.
Flavian Pratt, regular rider for Tarifa. He's going to be at Tampa Bay Downs, so that's why you're seeing a rider change there to Mike Smith. So you get the Hall of Famer Mike Smith riding for Brad Cox. Not a combination we see very often, but certainly both capable in their individual rights. Now, Tarifa, like you said, last year had a good 3-year-old season. One of her top victories came in the Mother Goose, grade 2 at Aqueduct in the fall.
In hand, Gunsong, John Velasquez with a quick look back. Tarifa's all into the inside. Gunsong is ready to pounce, and these two now shoulder to shoulder. Tarifa's got more. They're approaching that final furlong. Tarifa battles on. Gunsong has not pushed by yet. A very stubborn foe towards the inside. It's Tarifa and Gunsong. A final 16th, and Pretty Anna has emerged as well. Tarifa to the inside. Gunsong, Tarifa game, and wins the Mother Goose.
Game on the rail. Indeed, we'll see if we get that kind of stretch duel in the Beholder Mile. Of course, Beholder, the great one, she didn't have a lot of stretch duels in her career. She won a lot of them by daylight. 3-time winner in the Breeders' Cup, Beholder. She won the Juvenile Fillies in 2012, the Distaff as a 3-year-old in 13. Then just came back 3 years later and won the Distaff again in 2016. What a career for Beholder, earning more than $6 million. One of the best fillies and mares of the last 20 years, I would say. I think you can arguably put her up there in that conversation when you're talking the Zinatas and company in thoroughbred racing. Beholder, one of the absolute best fillies and mares. Rachel Alexandra, of course, in that discussion as well, Scott. But Beholder was an absolute star.
She was. I was, fortunate enough to be out in Southern California when Beholder was at her best. The race I remember most, other than her and Songbird dueling, of course, in the Breeders' Cup to end her career, was when she took on the boys in the Pacific Classic. It was not a good field in terms of males in there, but the way Mandela had her prepped and looking when she came in, it was a different Beholder that day. I'll never forget it. And man, that was one of those races where she won by open daylight, as you said, and one of the best females I can recall of this century.
You mentioned that, like seeing a horse and you just see that they look different. And I think that's something that, horse players don't get enough credit for sometimes. Like you kind of think you're just a paper player, you watch replays. You're not a horseman, you're not a trainer, you're not an exercise rider, but you know good when you see it. And you know when a horse
Absolutely.
just absolutely looks unbelievably well. That doesn't always mean they're going to win the race. I can tell you I watched many a walkover from the first turn from the NBC perch when I did research for the Derby. And the best horse who I've ever seen walking over for the Kentucky Derby was Bolo for Carla Gaines. Did not have a chance in the Derby.
Wasn't on
But when you
turf
talk
that
about
year.
a horse who looked absolutely primed to run a big race, you know good when you see it. That's the thing. If I always want to tell people this, like you don't bet a horse based on looks unless there's something on paper that matches it. Are you competitive enough in this particular race from your handicapping fundamentals? Then great visuals put you over the top. But never take a horse that you think cannot be competitive just because they look, because they can be a show horse, if you will. And like I said, like Bolo's a great example that just looked absolutely fabulous on the walkover one year towards the Derby. Let's go to Santa Anita's 9th race. If we can match up what you've got there in the Beholder Mile going with Tarifa. Maybe we can roll into a double in race number 9. San Simeon, 6.5 furlongs down the hill. We got 3 7-year-olds in this race. So we got some veterans involved, including Mucho Del Oro, 7 years old, and a winner of this race last year. Is it a repeat performance for Mucho Del Oro, or did you go somewhere else?
No, it just looks too good to be true for Mucho Del Oro. I don't think it's the strongest field. I really struggled to get by the top couple in here. I think Sorrento Sky, the other likely one to run a big race in here, coming off the 5 furlong win. But to me, Mucho Del Oro has everything you want for a race down the hill. You have experience over the course, as you mentioned, including success at the level. The outside post with speed or tactical speed. Those are the kinds of things that are advantageous, whether you're a long shot or a favorite. And in this case, I just think Mucho Del Oro is taking on a pretty suspect field for a grade 3. I think we've seen more deep renditions of the San Simeon in the past. So I'd be pretty surprised if Mucho Del Oro, assuming second off the bench, he runs his race after really having very little shot in the Gulfstream Park Turf Sprint, dominated on the front end by Coppola. I don't think he disgraced himself there. I think he'll be more forward here. Mucho Del Oro won't be a big price, but maybe you can single him, try to beat the Baffert favorite in the Beholder Mile with the 2 horses that maybe Jeremy and I liked.
Let's turn back the clock to a year ago in the San Simeon. Here's Mucho Del Oro on the front.
At the top of the stretch, Mucho Del Oro tries to sprint clear. Dancing Buck is coming after him in second. Laneway still with 4 to make up. Inside the 8th pole, Mucho Del Oro 2-length lead. Dancing Buck trying hard. Outside, Sumter is coming with a furious late bid, as is Laneway. But it's Mucho Del Oro all the way in the San Simeon.
Got the X factor in this San Simeon for me is Anarchist. He was second in this race 2 years ago to Motorius, a better addition with Motorius, I think, than anything we see in this year's San Simeon. But he's almost always a dirt horse, right? Very rarely do we see him on the turf. In fact, his only turf try was that second to Motorius. He's not necessarily in his best form, but he's second off the layoff. He's got plenty of class for Doug O'Neill. Do you give Anarchist a shot in this one?
Well, it's Mucho Del Oro's stablemate, so it'll be interesting to see. You would suspect that they wouldn't get caught up in a battle, but I think Anarchist's best racer right up and on the front end as well. To me, it feels, these kinds of moves, the turf success in the race in the San Simeon 2 years ago, as you referenced, maybe makes me worried a little, but it feels like if this horse was still at his best or close there to it, they'd be running in a dirt sprint. I feel like this is a little bit of a stab for me.
Yeah, good point in that. Let's go now from Santa Anita and change gears to Oaklawn Park, Middle America, where Torpedo Anna is back. Last year's Horse of the Year, starting her 4-year-old season. What an overachiever she's been. $40,000 purchase by Fast Anna's, won 8 of 10, a couple seconds, $3.8 million. Torpedo Anna had a dream season last year, just a head away from perfection, losing to Travers, her only loss in 7 starts. But if you look up and down the past performances, other than that Travers, there aren't a lot of top flight names that she's run against. She caught what I think was a down crop in the 3-year-olds. She got to the Breeders' Cup Distaff, and a lot of the big names had retired, were injured, didn't make it to the Breeders' Cup. She had a lot go right for her in 2024. Will that continue in 2025? It's hard to say. We've seen a lot of great 3-year-olds like Rachel Alexandra come back at 4 and not be quite the same filly. Do we expect her to continue to move forward? Will this be a little bit of an eye-opening season for her in the open elder division throughout the course of the year? I don't think she's got a ton of horses that she's got to worry about in this particular spot in the Azeri Stakes. But what do you make of the entire campaign as we look ahead for Torpedo Anna?
Yeah, my read is pretty similar to yours. I think first and foremost, the 3-year-old, not to take, anything away from her performances in her resume, but it was a very weak 3-year-old crop of fillies last year other than Torpedo Anna. So she was taking on significantly slower fillies almost regularly, which allowed Kenny McPeak, all her success allowed him to take that chance in the Travers. And she ran her heart out that day and, proved herself to be legit. I was underwhelmed by her effort in the Cotillion. The race in the Breeders' Cup Distaff was a lot like American Pharaohs, where it was a champion horse, but a race that was a parade. I just don't, I know she got a big number, doesn't do much for me, or at least on Brisnet, she got a big number. That number doesn't do much for me. I think you got to try to beat her. If she runs back to a race, she beats this field, but there's little to no guarantee that that's going to happen. And she's on the rail. She's going to be a very short price. I think some things can go wrong here.
As they come to the top of the stretch in the Breeders' Cup Distaff, and Torpedo Anna begins to move away. 1 furlong to go. She's in front by 2. Raging Sea still there, trying to fight for second. Then Candide in third. But this brilliant filly's going to take them all the way. Torpedo Anna, what a year for her. She won it by 3 over Raging Sea.
She's obviously the story in the Azeri Stakes, named for the 2002 Horse of the Year, who also crossed over and as a 3-year-old filly was able to be Horse of the Year, a 4-year-old filly when she did it back in 2002. She was an Apple Blossom winner, handled the track at Oaklawn, obviously, and now has the stakes that preps for the Oaklawn big race, the Apple Blossom, named after her in Azeri. But you've opened the door here with the way you're talking about her, so I get the feeling that you might think that Torpedo Anna is a little susceptible. So I'm going to pin you down to a name. Who can beat her?
Yeah, I mean, if you're pitting somebody to a wall, telling them most likely winner, you're going to take Torpedo Anna. But this is a gambling game, and the price differential between her and the rest of the field is going to be monumental. I think Jody's Pride has some upside here still. This is a filly that has been managed by Jorge Abreu all along. Like, she was serious. She went off, albeit in wash-off races, as a big favorite in a couple of races in New York. She held her own in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. Last year was a little underwhelming, but I think she came back and ran a pretty strong race. That was a good edition of the Inside Info, where there was 3 across the track: Mystic Lake, Emery, and Jody's Pride. She wants to go longer. I think she's got the most upside here. The pace should be honest. Hopefully Ricardo Santana Jr. can tuck in behind. And she's 8-1 on the line. I don't know if I would go much slower than that, but I do think the upside makes her worth taking a swing with.
Also in the field, the Sam Houston Ladies Classic winner, Recharges, won 3 in a row for Steve Asmussen. And then you've got the filly she just edged out, who was the beaten favorite for Brad Cox in that Sam Houston race, in Alpine Princess. So those two rematch in there against Torpedo Anna. But it's Jody's Pride, 8-1 in the morning line. Scott Schott for an upset winner there in the Apple Blossom Stakes. Feature race Saturday, or the Azeri Stakes, feature race Saturday at Oaklawn, the prep towards the Apple Blossom, which will come up in about a month's time. Let's go now to Tampa Bay Downs, where the big card of the weekend will go down on Saturday. It's Tampa Bay Derby Day there. Multiple stakes on the undercard. First of which that we will talk about will be the Challenger Stakes in race number 5. Then we'll hit towards the back end of the card with the Hillsborough, the Florida Oaks, and the Tampa Bay Derby. To the Challenger Stakes, the Michelob Ultra Challenger. So we're not going to put a lot of calories on, light beer for this one. Who do you like in the Michelob Ultra? Is it just Skippy Longstocking again? He won this race 2 years ago. He won it last year. He's going for the 3-peat. Skippy or somebody else for the 6-pack of Mick Ultras?
It was tough to go against Skippy here. He's going to be the favorite. He's got a strong resume, and what a tremendous job Safi Joseph Jr. has done managing this horse. Picking the right spots, taking chances unsuccessfully for the most part, although picking up the pieces in the Pegasus, but definitely finding grade 1 and grade 2 is worth some good deal of money. 3.3 million earned, the clear one to beat. I'm going to try to get the jump on him though with the likely second choice or number 6 most wanted. This is a Brad Cox runner that really has not done anything wrong in his career to this date. He got off to a late start. I remember the day he was running. He was, the talk of the town. He couldn't lose. He almost lost. He won by a neck, but then he rattled off 3 more wins. They managed him very patiently, didn't throw him to the wolves, and then he ran a big race in the Clark. I think he should be set up for a pretty big campaign. Hopefully he can is ready to take that step forward here. If he's not, Skippy should dispose of him pretty easily, but I think Most Wanted could be a serious horse moving forward in 2025, so I'll take my chances.
Let's go back to last fall when he won the Oklahoma Derby. One of my good friends, Dale Day, on the call.
Midway through the turn in the Derby, up front, it is Most Wanted, getting back against Indispensable, and EJ won the Cup, poised to pounce with a quarter mile left. Dynamic fourth, Flat Handby fifth, off the turn to the stretch for the Oklahoma Derby. Most Wanted digging in and trying to pull away, showing a little bit more, but here comes EJ won the Cup on the outside, and EJ won the Cup, puts a nose on the lead inside the furlong pole. Race on, Most Wanted battling back, very game. Outside EJ won the Cup, inside Indispensable. Most Wanted slight edge late. EJ won the Cup, one more try. Most Wanted stays undefeated to win the Oklahoma Derby.
You feel like we already watched that race somewhere on the podcast? That looked like Tarifa's Mother Goose. I mean, it kind of looked like head to rights. The horse goes by on the outside. The Brad Cox trainee dug back in. Most Wanted, since that race, did suffer the first defeat of his career when running second in the Clark, but he's just 3/4 of a length away from perfection. Most Wanted could be a 4-year-old to watch here in the handicap division as we get into 2025, maybe in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile division where Skippy Longstocking sort of found his home. And you mentioned about the campaigning of Skippy Longstocking. He really has been managed so well. And a lot of that, I think of a horse like Jackson Traveler, if you know him from in the Midwest and around the country. They never put him kind of where he doesn't belong. He's always spotted properly by Steve Asmussen and West Point Thoroughbreds. I always said that when he won the last time at Sunland Park, he's probably the best campaigned horse I've seen in the last decade or so. But Skippy Longstocking is not far behind it. They put him in the right spots. They go off Broadway to find some places where, some of the big horses aren't. And to make $3.3 million with Skippy Longstocking, a horse who's been okay, but never a superstar, for a $37,000 son of Exaggerator, they've gotten everything they can out of that one.
Without question. I mean, and he ran, second or third in the Belmont, I believe, 1 year too. So he's grinded away some big purses underneath, and then he's won those races you speak of. Jackson Traveler, one of many Asmussen horses that kind of fit the profile, probably the best. A Maryland bred, if I recall.
And also in this race, keep an eye out for Ben Doog, a horse who came from Dubai and, has been with Bill Mott for the last year or so, but Mott coming off that big weekend last weekend, as we mentioned already, with Sovereignty winning. He's got Flavian Pratt riding Ben Doog off the layoff, but this is a horse who fits at this kind of class level. A really good edition of the Michelob Ultra Challenge, $125,000, but you could put $250 on this race and nobody would say it's not worth $250. Skippy Longstocking, Most Wanted, Ben Dukes, real headliners, I think, for $125 in the middle of the card on Tampa Bay Derby Day, race number 5. Let's go to the 9th at Tampa on Saturday as we go to the Hillsborough Stakes. Grade 2 here on the turf course. They'll start on the dog leg on the turf course on the inside and have that little semi-bend and join the course proper to lap around here at 1 mile and an eighth. Chad Brown has won this race 6 times. Graham Motion won it last year. Those two combined have 5 of the runners in this year's Hillsborough. Are we talking Chad and Graham, or are we going somewhere else here, Scott?
It is very difficult to get by Chad and Graham in this spot. It's always tough to get by Chad at Tampa. He means business there, whatever year it is. I used to remember thinking, maybe Chad sends his B team to Tampa. No, that's not the case. He likes this turf course quite a bit. I landed on the one of those, the Chad's likely to take the most money. I know there's some other ways to go in here, but to me, it's very encouraging that Saffron Moon puts back-to-back races together. If you look at her past performances, she's been unable to do that since 2021 for Brown. And, he's going to be patient with her. She's rewarded him with good performances, including her win in the Endeavor last out. You get Pratt back aboard, and I think second off the bench speaks to probably a career best effort for her being able to put the races together. But this is a really fun race. Some of the Brown and the other motions, some of the other Browns and the motions in with big chances as well.
Yeah, Chad's got the Sands Point winner from last year, Spaladay, making her first start this year as a 4-year-old. We also got Venencia in here, who was third last time out in that Endeavor Stakes behind Saffron Moon. That's the Chads, but what about Graham? We talk about him going for back-to-back wins in this race. He's got the most interesting entrant in this race, no question about that. The undefeated 5-year-old South African mare, Gimme Another. She's never been beaten, Scott. She's 7 for 7 lifetime. No idea how good she might be, but we got a chance to see her on video last in her most recent victory, the Group 1 Empress Club Stakes. It was April of 2024. Here she is in South Africa.
As they round the home turn here at Turfentine, they've got 800 metres left to go in the Tab Empress Club Stakes, and it's Humdinger in her favourite role. She led it by 2.5 from Gimme Another in second. In third, Bavarian Beauty. Mrs. Geriatrics is right down the centre of the track, further back to Perfect Witness, and then came Gilded Butterfly. Now into the last 400 metres. It's still Humdinger, the leader by a length. Gimme Another's being asked the question back in second. Further away to Mrs. Geriatrics and Perfect Witness. They've got 300 metres left to go. Humdinger still rolls. Gimme Another looms up alongside and goes on by with 200 metres left to go. And it's Gimme Another who hits the front in the Tab Empress Club Stakes. Gimme Another leads by 2 from Humdinger. And South Africa, stand up and salute our new racing sensation. Gimme Another beats home Humdinger.
Will she get another? She's looking for 8 in a row. First time I'm pretty sure that we've had racing from Turfentine in our podcast here. We've had some South African horses come over here and do some good things in the past, Hippie Tombe and some others that that come to mind. Is she in that kind of line? We don't know, but you've got Graham Motion getting Irad Ortiz to ride, which is never a bad thing. Her workout tab doesn't look spectacular or fast, but it is what you want to see as far as a horse coming off a long layoff, right, consistent every 6-7 days at Palm Meadows. She's training right on cue up to this race. Watching the video, that was on yielding turf that day. Didn't look that yielding, but it was listed as yielding. She'll get over the ground at Tampa, I'm sure, fine. She's run on good ground over there. She's won over everything. So she's interesting, but I don't know what to make of her.
I don't either. She's not the kind of horse at a short price that I would be able to bet. Graham has had some success at Tampa, but has had a very slow Gulfstream winter down there. Mm-hmm. Mile and an 1/8 off this type of layoff. We're talking 11 months. She's going to have to be legit to beat the Brown trio and the rest of this field. But it's hard to knock a horse that's never lost a race. And in fact, really never has been, she was challenged. She had to be asked in that race. But once she got by the speed horse, she was pulling away. So it'll be interesting to see. Looking forward to seeing it. If I get beat, it would be cool if it's by her, but I won't be wagering on her.
Yeah, Mile and 1/8 is a long way to go off the layoff, no question about it. But she didn't show a lot of turn of foot in that race. That was more of a grind and draw away.
It was.
So I don't know if she's got turf mile or turn of foot, even though most of her races in Europe or in South Africa were at a mile. The little bit I've seen of her on video, she didn't look like she had to get up and go that you want out of a turf miler. So maybe the 9 furlongs will suit her well, and they've got her in the right spot. But she's going to have to beat some good ones, 3 of them, Chad Brown in there, in order to win the Hillsborough Stakes. Let's go to the Florida Oaks, race number 10 on the Saturday card at Tampa Bay Downs. Chad Brown's got a strong hand as always. He's got 3 wins in this race all time. Bill Mott's got 4 in the Florida Oaks all time, so Chad can tie the record if he's successful in this one. He's got a few in here to play with. He's got Opulent Restraint. He's got Berlante. So is it Chad Brown again? I know you said he's got a penchant for taking good horses to Tampa Bay Downs.
I landed on him again. I think Nitrogen is the filly to beat in here because she was very impressive getting the job done and finally breaking her maiden after having finished 3rd in a pair of grade 1s as a maiden in the Ginger Brew. Much better than looks effort. But the draw in the 9 hole with Opulent Restraint in the 7 hole led me to Flavian and Chad once again here. Opulent Restraint lost on debut at Saratoga, but was clearly well meant, going off at 3-5 in the 10-horse maiden special weight field. Backed it up with a win there, and then a win in the Chelsea Flower at Aqueduct to close out her 2-year-old campaign. Looks like she could be ready for a very big 3-year-old campaign. I guess the goal would be to get her either to New York or to Kentucky or both, and for those races. But this is her starting point, and I think she's got tactical speed to work out the trip that she wants.
He had Flavian Pratt aboard in that Chelsea Flower, part of his record-setting stakes-winning campaign for most stakes wins in a single season. She needed every ounce of Flavian Pratt that day to win by a nose.
Reach the top of the lane. Can Grace and Grit hold off the charge of Opulent Restraint, who's now in full gear? And here comes Opulent Restraint. Rare Art is following that move, and here down to these two. It's Opulent Restraint. Rare Art with every shot to run her down. It is still Opulent Restraint. Rare Art starts to move in closer now, and here's Rare Art. Rare Art to the outside. Opulent Restraint to the inside. Opulent Restraint and Rare Art. These two down the line. Opulent Restraint. Rare Art. Opulent Restraint holds on. Opulent Restraint and Rare Art. She's our Tiz. Finished third.
He didn't lose a photo in 2024, that Flavian Pratt. I mean, he was so in tune, especially when the money was on the line. He knew where the wire was, and he had just enough to hold on there by a nose. Flavian Pratt taking his show on the road to Tampa Bay Downs this weekend, and he'll have one of the key mounts in the upcoming Tampa Bay Derby as we change gears to race number 11 on the card. Mile on a 16 for this grade 3, where $400,000 and 50 qualifying points of the Kentucky Derby towards the winner. For the winner, Chancer McPatrick, one of the star runners in this race, 2-time Grade 1 winner last year under Flavian Pratt, winning the Hopeful and the Champagne. Pratt's back aboard. Chancer McPatrick starts his 3-year-old season for the first time since the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, Scott. That race in November, of course, out at Del Mar. He didn't run much in there. He was 6th of 10. Was it the 2 turns? Was it the competition? Was it the pace? A lot of stuff may have played against Chancer McPatrick. He's going to show up with blinkers on. He's going to carry 124, 4 more than everybody else in this field for his first start of 2025. What do you make of the possible favorite in here, Chancer McPatrick? I think he'll vie for favoritism with Patch Adams.
Yeah, I think he'll probably go off favorite. We shall see. But interesting horse. I'm first and foremost looking forward to seeing his return. Kind of really don't have a great feel for him, but my gut, and my feel is he beat lesser horses at one turn in New York last year. He did it nicely. He came from off the pace, so he lacked speed. So the combination of lacking speed and making those runs at one turn, those are never going to be my types of horses if there are short prices that I'm going to look for. I prefer horses that have a little tactical speed at one turn before stretching out. And that could have been a part of it. I mean, you can make an excuse easily for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile because they did run 1-2 around the racetrack after East Avenue missed the break. So it wasn't as if it was set up for him. But his stablemate now, Hill Road, had no problem, showing a little bit of life at least, and he didn't. So it'll be an interesting situation here. I'm going to bet against Chancer McPatrick, but I wouldn't be surprised if he performed well.
Breeders' Cup Juveniles kind of had a little bit of mixed reaction from the horses who have come back from it, but we did see Citizen Bull win, the winner of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He won the Bob Lewis Stakes. We also saw Getaway Car, 4th in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, already win the Summerlin Derby this season. So there's been some success. There's been some horses who have not come back well out of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Of course, you had already mentioned East Avenue didn't run well out of it. Ferocious, there's some others. So kind of a grab bag where we don't really know if last year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile was a good one or not. Right now, it feels a little bit subpar to me in terms of historical strength of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but horses like Chancer McPatrick can help rewrite that narrative if he's able to win the Tampa Bay Derby and come back strong. You mentioned his stablemate, Hill Road. Of course, they've only been stablemates since the Breeders' Cup because going into the Breeders' Cup, this was an Irish trainee for Adrian Murray, and since this winter has been transferred to Chad Brown's barn, and now they've run together as stablemates, uncoupled here, but both get blinkers on. Both were big closers in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Hill Road a surprising 3rd at 61-1, and what looked like a decent addition of the Juvenile going into it. He absolutely got no pace help and still ran 3rd in that spot. Umberto Rispoli was aboard them, but it'll be Tyler Gaffleone here on the East Coast riding for Chad Brown. What do you make of Hill Road? Chad said maybe he might need another work or two in this horse to have him where he wants, but he's got to get started.
Well, that's not what you obviously would want to hear, but I kind of feel like I've heard that before, and horses have outrun their odds. But
Sovereignty, 7 days ago.
exactly, yeah, last week. Um, I mean, as someone, and I know you are one as well, that really takes a big look at late pace ratings on Brisnet. It's hard not to see the 119 that this horse put forward when finishing third that day and really having no setup. Yeah, he passed tiring horses that day, and he now there's questions to be answered with an equipment change, maybe a work short. But I think we saw a horse that has ability, and I think we saw a horse that can get distance. So those are two things going for him, whether it happens for him in this race or down the road as we get closer to the spring. I think Hill Road has the look of a horse that can run a little bit.
There is potentially some speed in this race, but I feel more comfortable with the speed than I do relying on a deep closer here at a mile and a 16th, especially two horses coming off layoffs, two horses that are adding blinkers for the first time, and you don't know exactly how they're going to react to that in terms of their positioning. Will they be a little bit closer and not have the same punch? That's Chancellor McPatrick Hill Road. We're talking about adding the blinkers, but two speed horses in here who I think are both of quality, inside, outside bookends. Owen Almighty is a horse I have a lot of respect for, maybe more than others, and maybe that's falsely placed on him, but I actually think he's pretty damn good up to these middle distances. I don't know if he'll get 10 furlongs. Brian Lynch has also said he thinks there's probably going to be some distance limitations at some point. This could be Derby Day, a mile and 16th for 400,000. This could be the Derby for Owen Almighty. He's got the rail. Patch Adams to the outside needs a bounce back effort, but when he was good last year at Churchill Downs, he looked like one of the ones for Brad Cox. He's got plenty of speed on the outside. He missed the break last time out in the Southwest at Oaklawn in a race where nothing kind of went the way that you thought it would. The Southwest horses kind of had a mixed bag when they came back in the Rebel. Some ran better, some didn't. So we need to reset and recalibrate with all those Southwest horses to figure out really how good they might be. This is Patch Adams' chance to show what he can do, Scott.
It is. And real quick with Owen Almighty, I landed on Patch Adams, but I agree. Owen Almighty, I think if I had to bet on who's going to be the best racehorse and who has been the best racehorse thus far, I think I'd take Owen Almighty. It's just as we move forward here, the distances get longer. I have the same concerns as you and Brian Lynch. I think he's going to run his race here. I just think there's going to be at least one or two better because of the distance concerns. And that's why I think it's going to be Patch Adams' day. I think you mentioned the fact that you'd rather be on a speed horse in here with the question marks and the blinkers and on the two brown runners. I agree with that take. And I think Patch Adams is hopefully going to be in the perfect spot, not caught up in that early battle, but in a much better spot, Jeremy, than he was in the Southwest when he didn't have as much of an excuse as some others in there, but he got off to a stumbled start, and he had never done that before, and I think it took him out of his game. And Flavien Prat, I think if it was Giroux on him, he might have rushed him up more. Pratt played it patient. I think Patch Adams showed that he's not some world beater that can win with any type of trip that day. But I think we know now that, or we're hopeful if we're wagering on him at least, that being up and on the pace is going to wake him up. He didn't run bad last time, but it was an underwhelming fourth. So I'm hopeful he'll get that perfect stalking trip. This is a horse, Jeremy, that I thought was at the head of the class or right up there with Barnes and Citizen Bull as we turn the page into 2025. So I'm not going to jump off him quite yet.
He's one start from getting right back in that conversation, because if he gets back to that 10-length win at Churchill in the fall, if he dominates this field in the Tampa Bay Derby, which includes a couple top half finishers in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, multiple Grade 1 winner in there, a good quality horse like Owen Almighty, if you run roughshod over this field like he did at Churchill in the fall, he's right back in that conversation.
That's the one trying to go with Patch Adams, but Patch Adams has kicked it into high gear. 5 in front and opening up with each and every stride. Patch Adams finishes with a flourish and is geared down to win it by 10.
Yeah, that was around one turn at 7/8 of a mile. There's a lot of sprint top and bottom in his pedigree. I don't know that he ran out of distance so much in the Southwest Stakes as he was playing catch up. I don't think he's expected to be 7 lengths off the pace. Kind of got up into it. Should have run second from the top of the stretch home, and then he did run out of steam at that point. But again, if you're not in catch-up mode trying to make up the 7 lengths, then maybe he's got a little more zest in the stretch, if you will. So we'll see. A different trip. If Patch Adams is kind of 1-2 going into the clubhouse turn in this race, it's going to be a tough out. right? I mean, if he's right up into the pace, and I expect that he will be, Owen Almighty, Patch Adams from the inside and the outside, I think it kind of hit a converge point into the clubhouse turn. And I think it's those two to dictate the tempo. We'll see what the sprinter or the Oaklawn front runner Brodeur does here in terms of pace. This is a Nyquist colt for Mark Cassie getting tested for class. Cassie wants to see where he stands with this one. He was able to win wire to wire last time with slow fractions, but he did win a 6 furlong sprint at Oaklawn on the front as well. If Brodeur can get up there and become that third pace nat, and all of a sudden we've got ourselves a duel, then the brown horses from the back of the pack, if they respond to the blinkers and don't get caught up into things too early, those horses patient could have the right trip. Brown won this race last year with Domestic Product. He'll try to do it again with 2 shots in here, Chancellor McPatrick and Hill Road. But Scott and I are going to try to beat those 2 first-time 2025 runners with Patch Adams and Owen Almighty. I'm going to just take, like I like to do, rail speed. I don't have to think. I've got Irad Ortiz. And if you look at the last 2 weeks in Kentucky Derby preps, Irad Ortiz and the Rebel straight to the front and tried to kill him with Madaket Road. He did it again last week on the front end when he was riding in the big race. Where was the one last week where he went to the front? Who was Irad on?
We went to it was the Fountain of Youth, and it was
yeah, and he went to the engine in that one.
Though. Yeah, it was
Yeah, so I think he's going to employ the same kind of tactics. He's got speed to the rail. Brian Lynch says maybe we're not mile and an eighth and mile and a quarter horses. I think they're going to leave it all on the track. It's Owen Almighty's race it's his championship race, while the other horses might be looking to something next. And that's why I'm going to go ahead and take him. And we're going to reduce the variables. We don't have to worry about ground loss. We don't have to worry about anything. Get out of there and go under Irad, and we'll take our shot with that. But Patch Adams seems to be the horse to me that has the most upside, as does Hill Road. Hill Road could be any kind. If this horse from Europe improves, and develops from 2 to 3 off of that third in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, he could be one we're talking about for the Derby. And, of course, Chancellor McPatrick already has the Grade 1 credentials, so you know what you have with him. It's just a matter of if he's developed from 2 to 3, and if those races at 2, the 2 one-turn races, were as good as they looked on paper. We'll find out if those horses are of high-quality 3-year-old for the classic races. That's going to wrap up our handicapping for the weekend. I want to remind you, after our Saturday plays, be sure to play on Sunday with First Bet and Express Bet at Santa Anita, where there's a $2 million first rewards points hit and split in the late pick 4 at Santa Anita coming up this Sunday. So great promotion there. We also have that $10 money back special on the Kentucky Derby preps all the way between now and the Lexington Stakes in mid-April. So you've been enjoying that money back special this season on the Kentucky Derby preps. Win bets up to $10 are refunded if your win bet finishes 2nd or 3rd in the Tampa Bay Derby this weekend. Bet with First Bet and Express Bet, and always be sure to opt into the promo so that you're able to take part in those savings. Scott, I'm going to give you the last word on Tampa Bay Derby weekend. You best of luck in all your handicapping. Go ahead and send us home.
No, it was great to be back again. Hoping Jeff's back for next week. But I'm going to just in Tampa Bay Derby, obviously the race of the week. I'm going to, you talked me into using Owen Almighty more than I want. More than I was. I'm going to play Patch Adams on top, and I'm going to key Owen Almighty for 2nd and 3rd in the try, maybe try to get a price in there in the other slot. But should be a fun week, a little slower than last week, but the Derby Trail is always about as fun as it gets in horse racing, and that continues to be the case in 2025.
Have a great Friday, everybody. I'll be back on Tuesday with the It's Official podcast when we wrap up Tampa Bay Derby weekend and talk about all the hot topics in racing. On behalf of everybody with First Bet and Express Bet, for Jeff Siegel and for my partner here today, Scott Shapiro, I'm Jeremy Plonk. Have a great weekend.